Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bryan Lavarack. Today I am going to be talking to you on the diversification of the sugarcane agro industry in a world context. I am the chair of the Co-Products Commission of the International Society of Sugarcane Technologists. And so I'm going to talk to you a bit about a few things. So today I'm going to be talking first on about the International Society's Sugarcane Co-Products Commission. I'm going to then talk about a Rule 1, it must add value. Then looking further along, the criterion for developing a diversification industry is so-called PESTLE. I'm going to just review some of the first generation co-products that are out there in the industry. And then I'm going to give some sort of observation on co-product development and look at the basic market guidelines going forward, and then look at the next generation of co-products. And after that, we'll just review what I've said today and then possibly take some questions if we have time. Thank you. Right, so the first thing I wish to just say is that this presentation and the discussions following are the views of myself, presenter, and they do not represent the views of my current employer or its parent company, nor do they represent the views of the Australian sugar industry, nor the Australian Society of Sugarcane Technologists, ASSCT. For this presentation, the term diversification refers to products that do not contain sucrose, fructose, or glucose. So in other words, diversification is into anything except sugar. The International Society of Sugarcane Technologists, or ISSCT, is an association of scientists, technologists, managers, institutions, and companies and corporations concerned with the technical development and advancement of the cane sugar industry and its co-products. It's formed from 5 particular commissions. They focus on agriculture, biology, co-products, factory and management. So I'm the chairperson of the Co-Products Commission, and the ISSCT has congresses which are held every 3 years, and they typically attract between 1,000 and 1,500 delegates. The next Congress is planned for December 2022 to be held in Hyderabad in India, and that is, of course, COVID willing. So there's a bit of a question mark around that. In between every major Congress, there is a workshop that is held for each of the co-product sections and subsections of that. And the next Co-Products Commission workshop is on the valorization of factory products, which is the theme of today. And that's planned for December 2021 in Brisbane, Australia. And again, this is COVID willing. So you're most welcome to look it up on the ISSCT website for further details. Just to give you a bit further background about ISSCT. So the congresses are held every 3 years, and we have proceedings that go back to 1924. It contains a massive amount of practical information, really wealth of information concerning the industry in general and co-products in particular. The Congress proceedings date back to 1924, except for the war years where we missed out a few. And the website is given on the presentation. Okay, so ISSCT workshops are held between congresses and are a major learning opportunity because of their open and free-flowing discussions. So if you can make it to a workshop, I find them to be particularly useful because you can throw ideas there. And it's not as formal as the actual congresses. And usually the groups are fairly small, and you get to really thrash out and work through particular opportunities. As part of these congresses and workshops, there are visits arranged, and you can see the actual state-of-the-art production facilities and research and development places. Okay, I'm going to go back a little bit now and perhaps just reiterate one of the things which sometimes gets forgotten and forgive me for being a bit uh, taking you back to this basic rule. If you're going into diversification, it must add value to your factories or your organization. Sugar producers diversify into co-products, not into byproducts. The word byproduct has the image of a waste stream with limited value, whereas co-product means the product has value. We used to talk about byproducts in the 80s, but in the 90s we started to use the term co-product because it does have value. So if your team is involved in a diversification project, consider the product as a co-product, which is adding value to the manufacturing process. You're on the correct path to diversification. If the co-product you intend to diversify into is not adding value to the business, it is a loser. It means stop work on it and move to the next idea. The product has to add value to your company. Otherwise, don't do it. The next rule is been classified as PESTLE. There's a whole series of criteria around this. Now, there's various versions of this. This is the latest flavor of the month. So when you're going into diversification, it must satisfy these particular criteria. The criteria are one, political, and this is important. You have to have government support and the policies and the taxation policies, the rebates, and all the other bits and pieces. You have to have government support for the particular project you're going into. The second criterion is obvious, is economic. You've got to have access to finance. You have to have access to interest rates that are suitable, taxation policies, markets, and a good rate of return. And that is usually just basic. The third one is a new one, and it's got to do with the triple bottom line, is social. The projects that you undertake today have to meet the cultural values of your society, the demographics. You have to have educational levels. It's for the people who are consuming that are actually involved in your particular project. The third item there is technological, the state of the technology. Is it proven at demonstration level? Is it pilot or is it lab scale? If it's lab scale, well, you're taking a massive risk to go into it. So you want to actually have these things proven, particularly at demonstration level before you venture into it. And then, of course, then there's the obvious capital and operating costs, and these tie into to that second factor of economics. The fifth one is legal requirements, and this relates back to the political one. In other words, what is the current and legislation? More importantly, what are the actual future trends? So, if you're having problems with environmental legislation at the moment, what are the future trends as far as that goes? Also, things like safety and labor laws are really critical. The last factor is usually a major one, and I'll relate this with the top two, is environmental. Environmental is becoming more and more a major issue today, particularly with greenhouse gas emissions, pollution, and the zero emission targets that have been set, climate change. In a word, the environmental, it means the process must be sustainable. You're using sustainable materials going into it, and the products must be sustainable. Well, now when you start looking at the diversification options, you will find that there are a massive number and almost limitless. So the opportunities to diversify have been written up in textbooks, and it's just worthwhile to mention some of these. Our Sitka, who's based in Central and South America, have produced a really good book, and it gives you some options. It is a little bit dated now, but there are some. So these are, I would call, first generation um, opportunities. The second one is a book is by an Indian uh, um, author, Manohar Rao, 1997. The classic textbook is undertaken by Morris Patarao from Mauritius, um, and produced in 1988. And then there is a cane sugar engineering handbook written by Dr. Peter Ryan. And that's actually, there's a new version of it. I've got there is 2007. There's a later edition now come out 2017. And he does mention some of the opportunities more in the first generation aspects. Of course, there's a multitude of papers, and I just wish to draw your attention to a particularly good paper that was delivered at our last Congress of ISSCT by Regis Leal and Juliana Teodora. It's got some valuable information. All of these references are given at the back of the presentation, so you'll be able to see them there. But of course, the overwhelming impression from these uh, textbooks and presentations is that there are a bewildering number of options. So I cannot go through all of them, but what I will do is go through some general observations based on the history of the industry. Okay, so the first ones I'm just going to talk about is sort of the larger scale ones. These are major diversification projects with large capital costs with reasonable returns if they're well managed and supported by the respective governments. So of course you go back into sort of the modern era. The first major co-generation, sorry, the first major co-products is ethanol production for consumer markets. So it goes back into the 1650s with the Caribbeans when they produced rum. And from that, there's just been a continual development and it's continued to grow. And so potable ethanol has been there and will continue to be there. This has then evolved through into the first generation of fuel ethanol production, and in particular Brazil with their pro-alcohol program, which is spread throughout the globe to places like India, Colombia, and many other countries, too numerous to mention. The next major co-products field is cogeneration, and in particular Brazil, India, Mauritius, and many other countries, including Australia, are undertaking that. So it's a major opportunity and which has been taken. Pulp and paper has been there for a very long time, and there are major producers, particularly in India, and Argentina, and other countries. So it tends to be a major industry. There are usually some sort of issues around the environment. So there has been some recent work undertaken on looking at alternative technologies, and I have been involved in that as well. So on a smaller scale, from the larger projects, there are other projects that usually require a small amount of capital. They give reasonable returns provided the products and the opportunities are well managed in marketing. So the first then is animal feed production from molasses and bagasse. This is pretty standard in a lot of countries. Um, uh, if the company is not doing it itself, it is selling on molasses or bagasse onto somebody else that can actually produce these particular animal feeds. So they've tended to be fairly rudimentary, but have advanced with time and are now becoming a lot more sophisticated and can be very profitable. Of course, there's the usual fertilizer, compost, and soil conditioners from mill mud, ash, vinasse, and bagasse. So there's various combinations there. And of course, I must mention that in India, they are world leaders in this. They really have taken this down to a fine art. but all countries, including my own, have got some sort of form of fertilizer production where they're returning effectively the nutrients from cane production back to the fields or to the wider community. Particle and fiberboard has always been there. There tends to be sort of under the radar. There doesn't tend to be a very high return. One of the major companies in Australia actually started off in this particular field, and in fact has grown to such an extent that that company is now a major building supply product supplier, and is in fact even has divested of its sugar interest in total, and is now just a building um, uh, products supplier. The final option that I've put down there is yeast production. This has been there, so there is various types of yeast production. Usually they can be at the organization, or can be external to it. So the yeast production base for um, for bread manufacture um, or actual animal feeds, there's a really lucrative market there. There are some other niche markets, and I'll just mention a few of these. So you can produce acetic acid, you can react it with ethanol, and you can produce ethyl acetate. Some people have taken this a bit further, have got phenol, and they make salicylic acid, and then they produce aspirin and other fermentation products. In particular, I just need to mention the Andhra Sugars company in India is a leader in this, and they produce something in the order of about 50 co-products at their one site. A few others, dietary fiber. There's a small company in Australia making dietary fiber, and it's proving very lucrative. In East Africa, they found there's a nice niche market in producing distilled water. And you don't think of these things, and apparently it's good business. Again, in Africa, dust suppressants very often, for example, they've have used in the past molasses or vinasse, and they can either combine it with materials or put it onto roads as a dust suppressant. Sometimes they've also used it in minerals as well, just to suppress the dust in mining companies. Furfural is an interesting one. From it's been around there. It could possibly be called a large industry. There are two major producers, but there's a lot of competition from outside. And in this regard, there's a major unit, from my understanding, in Central America and one in Southern Africa, and there might be some on the way in India. Hand sanitizer is the flavor of the month with COVID, so this really relates to ethanol, and a lot of companies have taken short-term advantage of this particular product. Paper plates, again, this relates back to pulp and paper. At our last ISSD Congress, in the previous one in Thailand, we went around and they were producing paper plates, pulp from bagasse. Again, a nice little niche market and a good one. There are pelletized fertilizers, again, on the same theme as the larger ones. So places that I've seen in India where they actually make smaller quantities of that, they bag it for the home market and possibly for horticultural producers. And of course, there's trash or cane waste. Trash is perhaps not the best term. It's in English. It's used for golden mulch, for bales for animal feeds, supplementing bass and cogeneration plants. And I've just got a picture here of a demonstration unit that visited during one of our ISSCT workshops in Brazil. And this is a demonstration unit for the collection of 600 tonne a day of field cane residue or trash. They, you can see on the left there, they're actually putting it into bales and transport plus storage. Um, they move it in the big trucks, just to show you. I don't know if I've got my pointer. So they bale it in fields, they collect it, bale it, and then they move it in these large trucks. They store it in this unit here. You can actually see the truck going in. They then move it along. It goes through a debaler. It then goes through a cleaning unit, and it then goes through a shredder, and then they feed it as supplementary feed for a cogeneration boiler. And this was at the Ferrari mill in Sao Paulo state, Brazil. It was part of the Sucre project, and it's possibly one of another report that's worthwhile reading. And the final report for Sucre is on the web, and there's further details in the last slide. So there's been numerous successes in diversification. So in addition to the first generation co-products of ethanol, cogen, animal feeds, fertilizer, and there are numerous diversification successes. These are also in related industries, so that are particularly into lignocellulosics, and into other agro industries such as rice and corn, etc. And those particular industries produce sugars or have lignocellulosic feedstocks. Co-products are integral to these businesses and are often not publicized. They tend to operate under the radar, and we don't hear or see of them. Their production methods tend to remain hidden from us. We don't see them. But there are some really important examples that are out there. There's a slogan there that you can do anything except make money out of lignin. There's one Scandinavian company that has been making money out of lignin for decades and has been doing it successfully. Um, it's just by the way, that same company also has been producing ethanol as a byproduct, and I use the term byproduct or co-product, um, for many years, even before the term second generation ethanol came into play. So they do it as it's a very small operation compared to the larger, but their focus is on producing lignin for various products. So let's move on to the future, post-COVID, I would like to say. So what does the future market really want? So there's a newer generation of people out there, and they're starting to demand things. And they're looking at, first of all, is they do not want products that contribute to climate change. So there's a major discussion at this moment in time about targeting zero carbon emissions by 2050. These are real things. These are happening now. The products that we are making, they have to be non-offensive to various cultural groups. We've got to cater to those ones. You don't the people that are making consumer products do not want to offend consumers. So the products have to be vegan, they should be kosher, they should be halal, there should be, and there are other cultural groups out there that we do not want to offend. And those big manufacturers want to sell into those particular markets. The product should be biodegradable or non-polluting or recyclable. We do not want to be polluting our oceans, our land, and the air. On the same thing, we do not want to destroy the natural environment, so rainforests and barrier reefs. So in Australia, for example, there's a great push on the moment to actually minimize any runoff that goes out into the Pacific Ocean and onto the Great Barrier Reef. Furthermore, our products have to be certifiable to good manufacturing practices. So there's things like Bonsucro out there that is doing these things. these are basic, obvious things. And in a word, the whole thing is summed up by the term sustainable. We want to have sustainable products and we want them to be sourced from sustainable raw materials. And hey, sugarcane co-products are ideal for this. They are meet all of these particular things or need or with a little bit of management can be made to fulfill all of these things. So we've got a major opportunity here. So what about price? My company can make sustainable aviation fuels. We've done the study. We can use whatever the technology, I call it XYZ technology. But the price is 3 times higher than aviation fuel. It's not going to go anywhere. Yes, that is true. But we're starting to see changes to these markets that were formerly the sole domain of oil refiners and producers based on fossil materials. There are many technological developments happening that are reducing the cost of production, but the important thing is perceptions are changing. Consumers are changing their ways. And with it, governments, views, and legislation are changing. A lot of major airlines are doing trials on that. They know the future. They are doing this. This is happening. And a lot of consumer product manufacturers are actually now going out there and are specifying packaging materials for their consumer products that have to be produced from sustainable sources. And furthermore, they are willing to pay a premium. In the old days, the product had to compete, and invariably it was found to be very difficult to compete with oil, with material produced from oil sources or other fossil fuels, fossil materials. So let's talk about the next generation. So what's on the way already here? So second generation ethanol is here. It's been produced from bagasse feedstock, and there's two major examples on sugarcane, Cosan and Gran Bio in Brazil. There are other producers out there that are using other feedstocks, and there are other smaller places that are producing it from sugarcane. They tend to be a little bit under the radar, but it is here. The one classic story about co-products is that from farnesene for sustainable fuels. It can be used in SAFs, sustainable aviation fuels, but the company that actually was looking at it has found that it was far more lucrative to produce those oils to go into hand lotions and creams, and the producer there is Amyris in Brazil, and worldwide. So they found that it's a really interesting example of going into one particular field and finding it's not economic, and then diverting into another. So and it's there's a as I said, it's a really good example. Another one is really in the corn industry is PDO or 1,3-propanediol. They produce a fiber called Serona. I'm sure you've all heard it in the USA. Um, but there's major opportunities developing. At the university uh, been working with in Australia, they're looking into variations in animal feed with newer technologies. Of course, um, we have to relate back to our growers or of cane, and very often there are fallow crops that have to be fallow has to be undertaken. So there's cropping um, of soy and soya, which can be used to make a renewable oil. So it's a major opportunity. In fact, in Brazil, you can actually there's major advances in this particular field. The other one that is really exciting at the moment is industrial biotech. It goes by the name of it goes under various names, but industrial biotech for the production of fiber and protein is here, and is a major, major. Um, it's really revolutionary what is happening there. I just need to mention some of the other products. Um, Biofuels Digest on the internet listed solid hot and a few years ago, and is mentioned in the paper by Leal and Teodoro is 1,4-diacids, succinic, fumaric, and maleic acids, 1,4-butanediol, 2,5-furan dicarboxylic acid (FDCA), 3-hydroxypropionic acid, 3-HPA, glutaric acid. Now, these things are used as precursors in various materials, used in plastics. Major, major opportunities here. So there are various organizations that have produced reports on these. So there's the E4 Tech report. Um, there's a lot of US government agencies that produce reports. You just have to search the web for these particular things. So where are we at? The global challenge that is going forward. There's a massive opportunity exists for the sugar industry to use its sustainable credentials for the production of new co-products. In particular, there's a major revolution being underway in industrial biotech. The, it's just, I was chatting to somebody the other day, and the revolution that has just taken place is just astounding. Um, so there's new co-products being developed, particularly in protein, um, particularly for the vegetarian market. So we're having the so-called Impossible Burger out there, which is based on vegetarian, but tastes like meat, and it's fake meat. Um, so there's a large number of opportunities, and it is growing daily. So industrial biotech offers really some major opportunities. Um, I just give a reference there from Chemical Engineering Progress. They had a special supplement in 2019, which gives you some, but just get on the web and there's some major advantages. The other thing that I should mention also is if you're going into second generation ethanol, one of the co-products there is you're removing all the hemicellulose and the cellulose, and you're left over with the lignins. And there's a major opportunity to developing lignins, and there are some major advantages in the lignin field as I'm speaking, and there are some commercial developments out there. Again, I'm not going to mention the companies, it's not my place to do so, but if you get on the web, you will find them. So companies need to take stock of their future markets and develop strategies to tackle them. Several barriers exist to diversification, and really the main one is they have to go in competition with fossil-based products. They're in established markets. They've been around there for generations, and we have to go into them, and that is the major problem. The other one it really relates to the major fluctuations in oil price. We've gone through this crisis in with COVID. We found that the oil price went down to rock bottom, and now it's coming up again to what it was about it before COVID started. So this plays havoc when you're looking at products, and it's really very difficult. The other problem is really a kind of like a good one, is that we have too many of them. There are too many options out there. We really don't know what to focus on, and so there needs to be some sort of concerted effort to actually focus on a few things. One of the main advantages from or the lessons that we learned from the pro-alcohol program in Brazil was it was very focused. They knew what they wanted, and they knew what products they were, and they knew what technology. And by focusing on that, they had a concerted program, and they developed it, and they went for it. At this moment in time, there simply are so many options out there. So I'm going to conclude with a few remarks now. Um, First generation products will be continuing. and there will be a move to the next generation of diversified products. Biotech and the use of lignin will almost certainly play a role in diversification. The choices are simply bewildering. And perhaps there should be a goal to target a certain number of products. This is really, I think, where we should be aiming at is rather focusing. So when you go and look at a lot of these reports, you will notice that they have got a particular. They just take a short. They've got a short list of products there, and only evaluate there, simply because the choices are so bewildering. The other thing is, of course, um, there are going to be horses for courses. Um, every region has got their advantages and their major disadvantages. And so you need to take advantages, you, to take advantage of those particular um, opportunities that you have got. So Australia has got certain advantages and disadvantages. One of its disadvantages is small population and markets, but it's got the Asian continent at its doorstep. We really need to look at um, the the overriding goal when you're looking at any co-product. The rule number one is to make sure that it is actually adding value. I've seen very many opportunities where people go down the line and they don't understand what they really are doing, and they just forget that basic first rule. The co-product must add value to the business. It must make money, and it must be sustainable. Very often people go down these tracks and they throw money into projects, and they should really just say, that is enough. It's not going to make money. I need to get out of it and withdraw. And very often they get blinded by just the technical aspects of it. I've seen one or two of these things happening in my life, and it's just not good for that business. The second learning is you have to conform to all the pestle factors. You need to make sure that 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 the political aspects are there. Is it going to have the support of government? Is it going to have the support of the local population? Secondly, it has to be economic. It must have markets. Markets are usually a very difficult aspect. So it needs to conform to the economics and have a good return on investment. Perhaps the other major issue is environmental. All of the products need to use the credentials of the sugarcane industry, which has a got a major advantage as far as environmental goes. Lastly, I just want to make a note about the story about regions. You will find various regions have got natural advantages and natural strengths, and you need to play to those strengths and to the particular markets that you have got. Okay, I'm just going to go through some of the quick references I've made today. So Chemical Engineering Progress, they have got a special edition out, and I've used that as a reference. E4 Tech is a report that has been undertaken for the European Commission. It's a little bit old now, 2015. I have given you the reference there. Maurice Potteral is an excellent textbook. I've used it many, many times. It has got it's the only real issue that I have got is it's got the wrong title. It's called Byproducts. It's produced by Elsevier, and it's based on a man who's had a wealth of experience and has produced many papers at ISSCT. ICITCA is an organization based in Latin America, and they have produced various papers. There is a handbook, and my old friend Regis Leon has undertaken many reports, and a particular one on ISSCT, on a global view on bioproducts. That one has got a really good summary of all the major opportunities. Manohara, again, a very similar textbook to Patara, giving a major Indian perspective on a lot of the aspects. It gives a real thorough review of the first generation of products. Dr. Peter Ryan on cane sugar engineering. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I think I'll have to conclude my talk today. If there are any questions, you're most welcome to provide them. I thank you very much for the opportunity to address you, and I thank you.